This is The Chris Berry Show. Expert information on wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life. Information that you can understand. Here's your host, Chris Berry.
Welcome to The Chris Berry Show, where we talk wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life. We start every show off with a positive focus, just something positive that happened within the last week or so. And for me, positive focus is my son Ryan. He just completed another year of Pinewood Derby. So he's in the Cub Scouts. This is, I think, his third year, if I'm not mistaken. And kind of the classic Cub Scout event is always the Pinewood Derby. And it's kind of funny because I remember when I was in Cub Scouts as a child, I lasted, I think, about 6 months. And what actually was the point where I dropped out was my Pinewood Derby car was just awful. I remember I painted it like maize and blue for U of M, but just couldn't get the wheels on right, and it was just a cluster. So it's interesting going through this Pinewood Derby experience with my son, and this is our third year now. So last year we did a camouflage theme, kind of a military theme, more of a round type Pinewood Derby. But this year, Ryan, he was all about performance. So we did some Googling and YouTubing and really try to work on the aerodynamics of the car as well as the balance. Plus, make sure we had the weight in the right spot and the appropriate amount of weight. So felt like I was one of my engineering clients working on this Pinewood Derby car for him this year. But he did well, ended up coming in, I think, second in a couple of the races, but didn't take home any medals this year, which he was happy with. I thought we had a good run this year. But no medals this time around. But he still enjoys it, and he's still sticking with the Cub Scouts, which I think is pretty cool. I was talking to one of the dads the other day, and we're talking about what role Cub Scouts or Boy Scouts plays in a child's life. And we're talking about the history of Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts. And initially, the idea was that many of the young boys didn't really have any activities or any structured activity. And so Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts were kind of created to give almost a paramilitary or some type of activities for children to get them doing something. But now, I think Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts, it's almost the reverse. Like there's too much going on. And I think Cub Scouts is really kind of getting people back to nature and just the idea of getting away from electronics and using your hands to build something. So I think it's important to maintain that tradition, and it's something that it's exciting to see it through my son's eyes. So that was my positive focus. Another exciting Pinewood Derby done, and very excited about that. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk about today was interesting client experience I had. So we'll talk about that for a little bit. And then in our second segment, we're going to bring on Imani Wilson from Visiting Physicians. And she's going to talk a little bit about the role visiting physicians play in what we call the elder care journey of living at home independently. And then we get to the point where maybe we can't get out and get around. So the question is, how do you get to some of those appointments, like doctor's appointments? Well, Imani Wilson's company, the Visiting Physicians, is a great answer to that, where if you do have a loved one who's maybe homebound or a veteran or surviving spouse who's homebound, receiving aid and attendance, can't really get out to appointments, well, this is where visiting physicians can play a role to make sure that loved one is getting the care that they need. So stay tuned for our second segment where we have Imani Wilson from Visiting Physicians on the show. And then on the third segment, we're going to have, as usual, questions and answers. So if you do have any questions that you want us to take a shot at reading on air and answering on air, give us a call at 810-355-2584. Or you can email us anytime at askchris@thechrisberryshow.com. Again, askchris@thechrisberryshow.com. Or if you go to our website, thechrisberryshow.com, you can submit a question right there at the site. So that'll be our third segment. And again, our second segment, very excited, Imani Wilson from Visiting Physicians, where we're always excited to have fellow kind of team members in that planning for the second half of life realm. So Visiting Physicians this week, we look forward to having someone from Angela Hospice coming up, as well as a good friend of mine, Kathleen Yannick from the Area Agency on Aging, as well as Lauren Kovac, again, talking about the advocacy that is going on for Alzheimer's Association. And then also I'm excited to have Allison Murphy from Fox Run on one of our future episodes as well. If you're not familiar with Fox Run, they're a continued care retirement community in the Novi area, and we've partnered with them on a couple different projects. So very excited to have another community partner, Fox Run, joining us in a couple weeks. So what I wanted to start the show off this week is talking about kind of a client experience I had recently, a couple weeks ago. So I had some clients who, well, they weren't clients yet, but they attended one of our workshops. So we do these free clarity building workshops about once a week at one of our different locations. So we have some clarity building workshops coming up in Brighton as well as Livonia in February. Brighton, Tuesday, February 5th at 10 a.m. at our Brighton office. Tuesday, February 12th, 10 a.m. at our Livonia office. And these workshops, we have about 5 to 20, 25 people at these workshops. And we do them about once a week, and we try to keep them relatively small so that if you do have questions, you can go ahead and get your questions answered. And we joke around, we call it the cheapest time you ever spend with an attorney, so make sure you get your money's worth, right? But I had some individuals attend one of our workshops. And I remember them in the workshop, they raised their hand and they mentioned that they just had an estate plan done about 2 months ago from an estate planning attorney down the street. And so it was interesting to see, why they were attending the workshop. And it's because one of their friends recommended it, that we have a different approach with regards to planning for the second half of life. And so we ended up sitting down, and the situation was really planning for mom. So it was 2 sisters attended the workshop because they were concerned about mom. And dad had passed away about a year ago, and now mom was living on her own. And they wanted to get the estate plan updated. And so they sat down with an estate planning attorney a little while ago, and they did a recent estate plan. But then once they attended the workshop, they saw all the different things that really go into proper planning. And they really saw the holistic approach we take to planning for the second half of life, planning for retirements and beyond, which is very different than your typical estate planning attorney. So when they sat down with their estate planning attorney, they walked out of there with a financial power of attorney, a medical power of attorney, a basic living trust, but nothing really addressing what their primary concern was. And the primary concern was to make sure that mom's money lasted at least as long as mom did. Because she was starting to show some signs of dementia and slowing down. And so obviously it was important to plan for what happens when mom passed away, to make sure that mom's affairs avoid probate and everything goes where it's supposed to go. And that's really what estate planning is all about. That part's easy. But really the bigger concern was, what happens if mom didn't pass away right away? What happens if mom continued to age and faced all the issues that go along with aging? And that's really what the difference between estate planning versus elder law, or the holistic legal, financial, and tax planning approach that we take at our firm, is that we're really taking into account all these different aspects, because it's not enough to just know that you're going to avoid probate upon death and that your stuff's going to go where it's supposed to. Like, that part's easy. Almost anyone can do that. In fact, you almost have to screw it up sometimes for things to end up going into probate, because you can handle it through beneficiary designations and ladybird deeds, which are types of deeds that say they're in your name when you pass away, or they're in your name while you're alive, but then when you pass away, it goes to whoever you've named. So it's a way that we can transfer real estate, thereby avoiding probate. But what is more complicated is planning for what happens if you don't pass away and you face all the issues that go along with aging. So unfortunately, this family, they sat down with someone that they thought could help them, but that person wasn't even asking them the right questions. A lot of times it's not the answers that are important, it's asking the right questions. And so when they sat down with that estate planning attorney, they put together an estate plan, but they didn't really put together a holistic long-term care plan. And so after the workshop, I sat down with the two daughters and sat down with Mom, and they brought in this estate plan that they paid good money for. It wasn't cheap. Estate planning isn't cheap. But what we did is we figured out, okay, what do you currently have? And what they had was a plan that avoided probate and controlled the distribution upon death. So that's important. But what they didn't have was a plan to ensure that Mom would have the best quality of life possible. And that's really what we ended up putting together. And so we used some different tools that might be different than your common estate plan. So one of the tools we used to make sure that Mom received the best quality of care possible, that Mom would have the best quality of life possible as she continued to age, one of the tools we used is what's called a personal care plan. A personal care plan. And this is something that I think really differentiates what we do in our firm versus just your common estate planning attorney. So in most estate plans, you're going to have a trust maybe, you're going to have a will, a financial power of attorney, a medical power of attorney. All of those things are important. But also what's important is what's called a personal care plan. And that's the document that not only it's different than your financial and medical power of attorney. So your financial power of attorney appoints someone to make financial decisions if you're unable to. Your medical power of attorney appoints someone to make medical decisions if they're unable to. So what this personal care plan does is gives instructions to the financial and medical power of attorney on how best to care for you if you were to need long-term care. So if you think of your advanced directives or your medical power of attorney as something that's including end-of-life decision-making, then your personal care plan is long-term care decision-making. For example, do you want to be kept at home as long as possible? Do you want to visit family? Do you want your hair done once every 6 weeks or every 3 weeks? Do you want to maybe attend religious services? Do you have certain habits, like do you get coffee or tea at 2 o'clock every day? Are there certain foods that you do like or don't like? All of these things are things that should go into a personal care plan. So it gives instructions to that financial and medical power of attorney on how best to care for you. Plus, if you were to bring in any type of care, whether it's home care or maybe assisted living, well, it's a document that you can hand to that person that gives instructions on how best to care for you. For example, certain hobbies you might like him to engage in, certain television programs you like to watch, certain magazines or books on tape you'd want to listen to. For example, growing up, my parents gave me 3 foods that I didn't have to eat. Everything else they put on my plate, I had to eat. And those 3 foods were tomatoes, onions, and tuna fish. And I came around on the onions and tuna fish. I like a good tuna salad these days, but I still can't stand tomatoes. So my personal care plan says, as part of my personal care plan, it says no tomatoes. And I was working with a client a little while ago on his personal care plan, and it said no lima beans. I'm like, all right. No tomatoes. I was like, my brother. And then he said he wanted Crown Royal and hard cider. And I was like, this is the guy I want to party with in the assisted living, right? Now, understand, we don't go from healthy to passing away. We go through this aging process. And this is really at the heart of what we're talking about when we're talking about planning for the second half of life. So one of the things that we put together for this client is we identified that they didn't have a personal care plan, and we gave them the questionnaire to help complete or for us to facilitate putting together their personal care plan so that now, as Mom aged, while she still had capacity, she could get her wishes down on what she wanted her care to look like. So we thought that was very important. And then the big thing was we looked at what type of trust did Mom have. So think of a trust as kind of a rule book. We don't want to rely on the government's rule book, so we want to create our own set of rules. That's kind of really what a trust or estate plan is all about, is creating your own rule book. Well, in Mom's situation, she sat down with an estate planning attorney and she got a basic revocable living trust. Well, that's great, and that avoids probate and makes sure stuff goes where it's supposed to go upon death. But what that did not do is protect her from the devastating cost of long-term care. So currently, Mom was still living at home, but in the future, she might transition to need independent living or assisted living or potentially nursing home level care. Well, these days a nursing home costs about $8,000 to $12,000 a month. And we have a governmental program called Medicaid that'll help pay for that cost of care. Well, to qualify for Medicaid, a single individual can only have $2,000 worth of countable assets. And Medicaid is going to look back 5 years to see if you've moved any money around. And if you have, they're going to penalize you. So in this situation, Mom had a basic revocable living trust that offered her no asset protection from this devastating cost of nursing home care, of long-term care cost. So what we ended up doing is, even though she just did an estate planning with another attorney a couple months ago just down the street, we ended up having to update everything to move from a revocable living trust-based plan that avoided probate and controlled the distribution to now an asset protection-based plan that not only avoided probate, controlled the distribution, but now with the Castle Trust, which is a form of asset protection trust, now what we've done is we've started that 5-year race where now if we can make it 5 years from the time we set up that asset protection trust and move those assets into the trust, then 100% of those assets could be protected from that devastating nursing home or Medicaid spend down, which means that now we could have Medicaid pay that base level of care for Mom, but now we have a pot of resources available to pay for additional services to make sure that Mom receives the best quality of care possible while she's alive and well, and she can access the funds inside of the trust if she needs to pay for additional services. So that's just one example of understanding the difference between estate planning and elder law. I invite you to attend one of our upcoming workshops and join us as we bring on Imani Wilson talking about visiting physicians.
If you or a loved one is facing long-term care costs, make sure you talk with certified elder law attorney Chris Berry from the Elder Care Firm, like Jennifer did from Howell.
This past summer, my mom had to transition into a nursing home. So we contacted Chris to help get things in order. You know, I wanted the best. I wanted somebody who knew what they were doing. Chris was able to help save a lot of that money that my mom and dad both worked so hard for. I thought that everything would have to go to the nursing home, but it didn't. He was able to save us half of everything that would have gone if we hadn't contacted the Elder Care Firm. And we're all happy about that. Don't go to the nursing home without contacting Chris first.
Hello, I'm attorney Chris Berry. The Elder Care Firm is here to help you and your family find solutions. Call us today.
Protect your assets from probate, long-term care costs, the IRS, and get the governmental benefits you deserve. Visit theeldercarefirm.com today or call 810-214-3800. 810-214-3800.
Welcome back to the Chris Berry Show, and I'm very excited to have Imani Wilson from Visiting Physicians. How you doing, Imani?
I'm good. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. So, very excited to have you on the show today. And Imani, if you could, tell me a little bit about what Visiting Physicians are.
Well, Visiting Physicians is a company that started roughly in around 2014, going out to see patients in their homes, which isn't around a lot.
Sure.
So we have visiting doctors that goes to see their patients. We have like podiatrists and pain doctors that can help patients in their home who's gone through like a surgery and need a little bit of help, who needs just medications refilled and aren't able to get to their primary care physician.
Sure. So do you know how the company started?
Well, actually, Jonathan, my administrator, he started it up. He was working with a few of his partners. He had a few visiting companies that didn't work out too well, but this one, it just took off running, and ever since we've been in business.
Sure. Yeah. So who's a typical client for you?
Mostly we have elder patients around 50 to sometimes 100 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Do you know how old your oldest patient is right now?
Our oldest patient right now, I believe, is like 103.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Her
Yeah.
birthday just passed.
Oh, nice. Yeah, we just recently lost our oldest client. She was
Really?
107.
Oh, wow. No
And
way.
she was still living at home. She had some help at home, but she still enjoyed gardening and everything.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, so, yeah, 107. So, and where are you located, or where do you service?
Well, we're located in Southfield, but we have also a Traverse City office. And we go out pretty much from our Southfield office, 100-mile radius. So we go down as far as Flat Rock and Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, that area. And then Traverse City, I believe, is a 50-mile radius from
Sure.
there.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. And so who is, I guess, your typical client, or why are they looking to a visiting physician?
Well, usually they look for us because, like I said, they can't get out to the doctors, especially like Michigan time now,
Sure.
where it's 10 inches of snow and they can't go anywhere.
Right.
So we go out, we help them. If they need any additional services, we can provide that for them.
Okay. And they're going to travel in the snow? The reason I asked this, I saw something funny the other day that big snowstorm, and we're going to call the Domino's driver, who's some 17-year-old who is driving some beat-up car to try to make it, but we're afraid to go out in the snow.
No, yeah. It's very rare that we're not working. Like today, we're working.
Sure.
So if there is any chance that we're not working, we always let the patients know and try to accommodate them the best we can.
Okay. And how do patients find out about your services?
Well, we've been on a previous radio show. We've also have a website.
Mm-hmm.
We have flyers that's going out to the patients, and it's a lot of the time is word to mouth. So we're in like facilities, and patients are like, "Hey, well, I've never seen a visiting doctor. I need a doctor now. Can you guys see us?" So is the real word to mouth, and we also have cars that's wrapped with our logo and everything.
okay.
So if you see it, you pretty
Sure.
much know it's we're out
Sure. Yeah.
out there.
Yeah. So when I picture kind of visiting physician, I picture the old days where the doctor is coming for a home visit, bringing his little bag and that type of thing.
That's exactly what it is.
Is that kind of what it is?
He is the
Yeah.
doctor, and he have a medical assistant, and the medical assistant usually have the medical bag with like the patient's forms and blood pressure cuff and the stethoscope and everything. So that's exactly what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a different cost structure to having like a visiting physician versus visiting a physician at his or her office? Or how does payment work?
Well, most of it goes through insurance.
Okay.
So we take quite few insurances. The only insurance that we don't take is like Medicaid, Molina, those
Okay.
type of insurances. But 100% of the time it's covered by insurance. And then if there's any like co-payments or anything and our patients cannot pay those, then we always try to waive them or help them through that.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Okay. All right, great. And now the patients you're visiting, are they all at home? Are they in communities or facilities?
Well, we primarily go to homes, but we've been in some assisted living buildings. We have group homes that we go to. So, yeah, and then in Traverse City, we go to, like, skilled nursing facilities.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And if someone has questions, what's the best number to reach you at?
Our best number is 248-327-6196.
Okay. All right. And now, what type of services are covered by a visiting physician? Can we do things like X-rays or
For sure. If a patient needs an X-ray, we can order them and then get them to the home. And then we can also do podiatry, which is our foot doctor. We have a pain specialist on board, a wound care physician with us. And then we also work with like different type of home cares, and they can order nursing, physical therapy, and those things as well.
Okay. What would you say the most common type of visit from a visiting physician?
The most common is like our internal medicine, which is basically covering their primary health problems. So if they have like COPD and may need an inhaler or something, we can help out with that.
Okay. And how would someone qualify for an in-home visit from a visiting physician? Is there any qualifications?
There are a few qualifications.
Sure.
Actually, we go through like a screening process, we call it.
Okay.
And we ask a few questions. So one question may be, if the patient is able to leave out to their home and go to go to an internal doctor,
Sure.
like in a hospital, or we may ask them, excuse me,
Yep.
or we may ask them, do they require any special transportation
Okay.
to leave from home or anywhere else?
Okay. So really, you're trying to ensure that they can't travel on their own.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so then, is it an insurance qualification? Is that why you have to run them through the screening process?
Yeah, definitely. If we don't have any homebound patients, then it is harder for their insurance to pay for it.
Oh, okay.
But most of the time, most of our patients would have insurance.
Okay. All right. And then the patients that you have, are they typically ongoing patients, or is it more of a one-off type deal?
No, they're ongoing for sure. We've definitely had some patients we've had with us since we started the company, basically. And then there's newer patients who come in and out, but definitely ongoing service.
Okay. And I'd assume just because they do have to be basically homebound, it's mostly seniors that you're working with,
Mostly
right?
seniors. There are a few people who are younger who are like mentally disabled, who can't get to the home, and like their parents or their children is unable to get them out because of that reason.
All right. And I assume bad roads isn't a good enough reason.
No, unfortunately.
All right. And you mentioned physicians traveling. So how far are they willing to travel? What counties? I know you kind of touched upon it.
Yeah.
Which counties around here?
There's Macomb County. Mm-hmm. There's Wayne County that we go to. What other counties?
Oakland County?
Oakland County for sure. We have a really big base in like Macomb and Oakland County.
Okay.
And then we also go up to Flint and Saginaw area. I can't remember what county that is.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And you mentioned insurances. Do you accept all insurances, or are there some insurances that are not covered?
Not all insurances. Our insurances that we do accept is mostly HMOs, PPOs, which is mostly Medicare and Medicare Advantage plans. We do take like out-of-network plans like AmeriHealth, but there's also Priority that we take, Blue Cross, HAP, Humana, those insurances we accept.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, good. And you said that the company's been around since 2014?
Yep.
And how long have you been with the company?
Since about 2014.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
So probably a few months after they started, I came about it and started it.
All right. And what's your role with the company?
I'm actually a medical scheduler, so all of the providers that goes out, I do scheduling for them. I send them out to the patients' homes.
So basically you're the boss and they go where you tell them to go?
Well, I wouldn't put it like that, but I tell them where to go.
Yeah. What's something that you like about your role with the company?
The communication between the patients. I have patients that I can talk to almost for 20 minutes on the phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just talking to them and interacting with them is probably the best part of the day, especially when they say that they enjoy speaking with us or we provide good service to them.
Yeah, it must be rewarding to know that like you're providing this service to the community. And,
absolutely.
And it really reminds me of the olden days of that visiting doctor, the family doctor.
Yeah, it's great. I love the customer service and I love providing that service for our patients.
Yeah. And how many doctors are part of the team?
We actually have 9 doctors.
Okay.
We have 3 nurse practitioners, a DO, a MD, and I think 3 physician assistants.
3 physician assistants? Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. And as part of, I guess, any team going out, is it always the same team going out, or would it rotate depending on the needs?
Most of the time it rotates. We have like a phlebotomist on board with us, so if we have...
And that would be...
somebody who draws blood, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, big medical words, all right. But yeah, if we have patients who have like heart veins to get for blood draws, we will send him out with the provider and we'll get their blood that way so we know that their blood is taken.
Okay. And so when do you typically begin working with patients? Is it because they've went into the hospital and now they're going back home, or Or when do visiting physicians typically get brought in?
Yeah, when they go to the hospital and get back home, or they've been to rehab and go home, they've been to hospice and they no longer meet the needs and go and continues to stay home. We also have some patients who finds us and let us know that they had a previous visiting physician and they would like to work with us instead. So it really depends. But there also is like home cares who send us the referrals, and they might get the referral from the hospital.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you work with like private duty home care companies then?
We work with one or two private duty, not too many, just because it's private pay for patients. So we try to work with them as much as we can, but not as much as we should.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And you mentioned sometimes patients had a previous visiting physician. Why do you find that they move or transition to work with you?
Sometimes it might be that they're no longer in the servicing area for that previous visiting physician. It might be due to the insurance. Sometimes they just don't like the service that they got from the previous one.
Sure.
Yeah, and they just come on board to us.
Okay. All right. And maybe you can say to this or not, roughly how many patients are you working with? Or let me rephrase that. Are you still accepting more patients?
Of course, we're always accepting new patients every day. They just can call us and let us know they need a visiting doctor.
Okay. And what's that number again if they were to call?
Yep, it's 248-327-6196.
Okay. And so we talked about kind of the best part about working with visiting physicians. What's the most difficult part of your day? It can't be all rainbows and sunshine all day.
Sometimes there's few like things that's like, oh, you just ruined my day. But it's not many. It might be an upset patient or an upset family member, but we don't try to let it get to us too much. We understand that it is their families and it's their health that we are working with. So we always have to be compassionate and try to work with them the best we can.
No, that's a great answer, because a lot of times these people are probably at least I know when I go to the doctor, I sort of think about doctors or shots, I start getting a little bit stressed and
nervous.
Might be a little shorter than I normally would be. And so it's great that they're able to work with someone as friendly as you on the phone.
Yeah, we try so hard. That's like I said, we always try to be very compassionate and sympathetic with our patients as much as we can.
Sure, yeah. So it sounds like you've had some amazing growth in the last couple of years. Now, where did you start with this many doctors and physician assistants, or have you added team members as you've grown?
We've definitely added. We started off with 3 providers with us. We didn't have pain. We didn't have podiatry. We didn't have all of those ancillary services. And over the years, we have grown. We just really started the Traverse City area, and we've grown pretty well up there. So yeah, as the years go on, we grow bigger and bigger.
Yeah. So what would you attribute to the success or the growth of visiting physicians?
I would like to think that I've helped with the growth a little bit.
Sure.
But like I said, just being on top of my job, communicating with the patients as much as I can, bringing out our services like now, and letting everybody know what we do and what we can do to help them.
Sure.
I feel like that's the best way to help with the growth, and that's what we've had help with growth.
Okay. And so if you have a loved one who may need a visiting physician, Imani, again, one more time, what's the phone number if they want to reach you?
Yeah, the number is 248-327-6196. Please feel free to give us a call anytime.
All right. And then also, is there a website where they can find your information?
Yes, www.ivpspc.com.
Awesome. Well, Imani, I want to thank you so much for spending time with me and listeners talking about visiting physicians.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. And we'll have all of Imani's information in the show notes. And stick with us. In the next segment, we'll get into some of our questions and answers that our listeners have. So, Imani, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me again. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Certified elder law attorney Chris Berry from the Elder Care Firm in Brighton can help you protect your assets from the cost of long-term care, and they can also help you with estate planning, like they did for Linda Emerson.
I had to redo my will. It weighed on me that I hadn't changed it. I wanted to make everything easy for my daughter whenever I do keel over. But I went in, it was very professional, and sat down with Chris. I would definitely suggest him because he knows his stuff and he's not aggressive. He's, very friendly and makes you feel comfortable because I think he realizes it's not a comfortable thing for people. It was just an easy process. I came out of it and I told my daughter, "It's all yours, kiddo."
Hello, I'm attorney Chris Berry. The Elder Care Firm is here to help you and your family find solutions. Call us today.
Visit theeldercarefirm.com today or call 810-214-3800, 810-214-3800.
Welcome back to the Chris Berry Show. And on this segment, third segment, as we like to do, we're going to get into some of the questions and answers that our listeners have. So if you do have a question and you want us to take a shot at answering it on air, give us a call at 810-355-2584. And some of the questions we'll select and we'll read those on air. Also, if you want to get your questions answered in live, then I suggest you attend one of our free clarity building workshops. So coming up February 5th at our Brighton office at 10 a.m., we're going to have a clarity building workshop. And again, we generally have anywhere up to about 15 to 20 people at these workshops. So seating is limited. And then Thursday, March 7th, we're going to be at our Novi office. So in March, we're going to be hitting the Novi location. February is going to be Brighton and Livonia. February 12th, 10 a.m. is Tuesday, February 12th, 10 a.m. We're going to be at our Livonia office giving our Clarity Building workshop. So check our website, thechrisberryshow.com, and there's a spot where you can click over to see a list of our upcoming workshops if you do want to register. And you do have to register because seating is limited. Give us a call at 810-355-2584 if you are interested in that. Now, I'd like to get into our questions. So first question is, who should I name as the beneficiary of my IRA or 401k? And this is asked by Elizabeth. Should it be my trust or my kids after my spouse? This is kind of an interesting conversation because depending on who you ask, you're going to get different answers. But assuming that you set up the trust properly and you've built in asset protection for the beneficiaries, then typically what we do is we name the trust as the beneficiary, and we include special language so that we can stretch out those IRAs. Because when you turn 78 and a half, you have to start taking out your required minimum distributions because the government's not going to allow you to defer paying taxes forever. And then when it becomes an inherited IRA, no matter what your age is, you have to start taking out required minimum distributions as well. So the way that we put together our trusts is we'll typically allow it to qualify as what's called a designated beneficiary so that we can continue that stretch out while still building in asset protection. So most often in our office, what we do is we name the spouse as the primary beneficiary so that they can do a spousal rollover where now that IRA becomes that surviving spouse's. And then we name the trust as the contingent beneficiary. Because also we had a Supreme Court case in 2014 called Clark versus Ramaker that said an inherited IRA doesn't have the same asset protection nature as owned IRA does, or your IRA does. So it's very important that we build in the asset protection that gets stripped away when it becomes an inherited IRA. So that's why a lot of times, more often than not, we're naming the trust as the beneficiary of those IRAs or 401ks. So Elizabeth, hopefully that was helpful. Now our next question is from Sherry. And Sherry asks, what is the difference between a revocable and an irrevocable trust? Well, that's actually a pretty complicated question because there's lots of different types of revocable and irrevocable trusts. For example, in the past, a lot of times we would use irrevocable trust when we would do estate tax planning. Because in the past, if you had more than the exemption amount of $600,000 and you passed away, then the government's going to take another swipe of your assets. That's called the estate tax or the inheritance tax or the death tax. So a lot of times we'd use very specific irrevocable trust to try to protect or shield those assets from that government coming after the money upon death. Well, now the exemption amounts at $11 million, $22 if you're married. So a lot of times we're not using irrevocable trust for estate tax purposes, but now we're using a variety of different types of irrevocable trusts more for the long-term care question or the long-term care dilemma of how do we protect our assets if we were to need nursing home care? How can we protect our assets from the devastating cost of long-term care? And so more often than not, now we're using irrevocable trusts in this arena. And the nice thing about it is that when we're planning for long-term care, we can build in a lot more flexibility than we could when we were using irrevocable trust for estate tax purposes. Where now, even though the type of trust we use, we call it a castle trust, it's irrevocable, you can still change beneficiaries, you can still change trustees, so you can still move money around, still be in control, but because of the way that we set up the trust, it doesn't count towards that nursing home or Medicaid spend out. So even though it's irrevocable with the modern day asset protection trust where we're planning for long-term care, not planning for the estate tax dilemma, we can build in a lot of flexibility, even though the trust is irrevocable. And this is something that we spend a lot of time talking about in our clarity building workshops, is the difference between a revocable versus an irrevocable trust. More specifically, we use a castle trust, like a castle, like Dungeons and Dragons, or think of medieval times, a castle. So you put your things into the castle, and your treasure is protected if it's inside of the castle. So that's a modern form of asset protection trust, a modern form of irrevocable trust that still offers a lot of flexibility. In fact, it's most people think it seems more like a revocable trust than an irrevocable trust with that type of castle trust. So it's a complicated question because there's lots of different types of irrevocable trusts, and not all irrevocable trusts are created equal, just like not all advisors or attorneys have the same level of knowledge. So especially if you are kind of shopping attorneys, make sure if you're talking about one irrevocable trust from another irrevocable trust, make sure it's an apples-to-apples comparison, because there can be drastic differences in different types of irrevocable trusts. And again, a great way to learn more about irrevocable versus revocable trusts would be one of our clarity building workshops, where we have some coming up in our Brighton, Livonia offices in February, and then March, where we have workshops coming up in Bloomfield Hills as well as in Novi. And if you do want more information, visit our website at thechrisberryshow.com or give us a call anytime at 810-355-2584, and we can get a list of our upcoming workshops going out to you. So hopefully that was helpful. Now, here's our next question. Can I have a will if my husband doesn't want one? We have adult children and grandchildren. So this is from Melanie. My husband and I have been married for 12 years, lived together for 6 years prior to that, so a total of 18 years. We each have 2 adult children and 7 grandchildren. Currently I have 2 homes and about $1 million of 401k and about $800,000 in his, $200,000 in mine. I've been asking to put together a estate plan for the last 8 years. He always has an excuse. We're now 63 and 70. I want to know if I can have my own estate plan and what would that include. So, Melanie, this actually isn't an uncommon situation. I remember about 3 weeks ago I had 2 of very similar cases come in on the same day. So you don't have to have your husband to create your own estate plan. You can go ahead and create your own estate plan. A lot of times it would involve setting up a trust because a will, if you remember, a will basically gives instructions, probate court, on how to administer your estate. So if you're looking at avoiding probate and you want to control that distribution, then most likely you don't want to rely on a will-based estate plan, because all a will does is gives instructions, probate court, on how to administer your estate. So if you're looking at avoiding probate, then you're most likely going to want to rely on a trust to avoid probate and control that distribution. Now, you could set up a trust-based estate plan. In addition to the trust, you would also do a pour-over will, as well as a financial power of attorney, medical power of attorney, and a personal care plan. But with that trust, one of the things you're going to have to decide is, well, if your husband isn't going to participate in the planning, what do you want to see happen with your stuff? Who do you want it to go to, and who do you want to administer that trust? And it sounds like you have adult-aged children, and hopefully they have good heads on their shoulders, so you could involve them in the planning. Now, keep in mind, if you were to have everything go to your kids instead of your husband may be able to make what's called a spousal election, where he might be able to make a claim of, and I forget this number because we don't reference it every day, but I want to say that the spouse may be able to make a spousal election of about $200,000, where they would be able to take the first $200,000, but then the rest of the assets would be able to go down to your children. But they would have to make that election. They'd have to proactively take that step to petition the court to get their spousal election. But a lot of people don't even realize that there is such thing as spousal election. So let's say that you did want to, disinherit your husband and leave everything to your kids. That could be something that would be doable inside of a estate plan, more specifically inside of a trust-based estate plan. But ideally, hopefully you and your husband can get everything worked out, get on the same page, and put together a estate plan, the two of you. But if he's not going to participate, then at the very least you need to think about getting your own ducks in a row, even if he's not going to participate. Because understand, everyone has an estate plan, whether they like it or not. And it's up to you whether you want to follow the government's rule book, the government's estate plan, or do you want to create your own estate plan? Because the government has this thing called intestacy, where if you're to die without a will, without any type of estate plan, and assets end up going into probate, well, then the estate would follow the default rules of Michigan. So I'd just tell your husband, even if he doesn't want to participate in the estate planning process, he has an estate plan. And right now it's the government is dictating what his estate plan would be if he were to pass away. So does he want to leave it up to the government's rule book, or does he want to take matters in his own hands and create his own rule book? And maybe if you have that conversation, telling him that he already has an estate plan, that it's the one that the government's created for him, and ask him whether he wants to rely on that or not, that might give you some fuel to the flame of getting him off his butt to put together an estate plan. Because guess what? We're all going to pass away at some point. Might as well put together a plan. Now, that said, I think my oldest clients who never had any type of estate plan were 93 and 94. So they didn't have anything on paper, but at that time they felt it was the right thing to do. So you certainly can procrastinate longer, but keep in mind it's something that's going to happen to all of us. So might as well develop a plan for it. Now, this is from Bob. Bob asks, can my brother take everything in the bank account? My father recently passed and named myself and my brother on bank account as, he writes in TTEE, which I assume is trustee. That's the acronym we typically use for the role of trustee. And in the will it states that my father wanted everything divided equally among the three of us. My brother and sister do not get along whatsoever. Being named on the account, am I allowed to go in and secure my sister's 1/3? Also, is my brother, the named executor, allowed to take everything, even though I'm on the account as well? Well, Bob, to properly answer, I need to clarify something. Just how is that account titled? For example, if it was naming the three kids jointly as, say, transfer on death or beneficiaries, then each of you are now named beneficiaries where you can take the money out of the account if you want to. Now, TTE, typically that acronym stands for trustee. So what that means is I'm going to assume that the account is in the name of the trust. So when your father passed away, then now it's up to the successor trustee, who typically is the same person named as an executor under the will. They would be in charge of basically paying off any final expenses and then distributing the account to whoever it's supposed to go to. So you mentioned that your brother is named as the executor. What that would do is I would then assume that he's also named as the trustee of the trust. And so what that means is even though if the will or the trust says that it goes to the three of you evenly, there's one person basically handling that process. And if your brother was named as executor, chances are he's also named as the trustee. And so what that means is that the bank is really only going to work with your brother. Even though you and your sister are named as beneficiaries, the bank they can only work with a person who's named as a trustee. And it sounds like your brother. So what your brother's going to have to do is get a certificate of trust drawn up to show that he's the initial trustee. And then with that, he takes that into the bank. And then from that point, he can then distribute the assets after any final expenses are paid off. And it sounds like it would be 1/3 to you, 1/3 to your brother, and 1/3 to your sister. Now, your brother, because he is named as a trustee, he has a fiduciary duty to follow the terms of the trust. So he can't just go in and take everything, even if that's what he wants to do, because it sounds like him and your sister don't have a good relationship. So even if he wanted to go and just take his sister's portion, he owes a fiduciary duty to follow the terms of the trust. So even though he might not like it, he has a duty to distribute the 1/3 to the sister, whether he likes it or not. So that's something to keep in mind, is that just because you're named as a trustee, that doesn't give you free authority to do whatever you want. You have to follow the terms of the trust. Otherwise, one of the beneficiaries could potentially take you to courts to petition the court to maybe appoint a different trustee, to compel the trustee to act. Or if the trustee takes the money, then you could look at potentially not only civil but also potentially criminal penalties if there's any type of embezzling going on. Because again, the role of a trustee, you owe a fiduciary duty to follow the terms of the trust. It's basically a private agreement. It's a private contract where you've agreed to follow the terms of the trust. Now, a lot of times there's wiggle room, like how soon do you have to wrap things up? If you're selling a house, what are you selling the house for? There's things where the trustee does have discretion, but at the very least, they have to follow the terms of the trust. And if the trust says the beneficiaries are to be the 3 siblings evenly, then whether your brother likes it or not, if he's going to serve the role of a trustee, he needs to, after he wraps everything up, he needs to distribute those assets evenly amongst the siblings. So, Bob, hopefully that's helpful. Always difficult when kind of family dynamics play a role in the planning or in the estate administration, and certainly upon death we see weird things happen sometimes. So that's it for the questions and answers. I hope you've enjoyed this show this week. Look forward to talking to you next week. Make it a great week. Take care.
Learn more about Chris Berry and how he can help your family by visiting online at thechrisberryshow.com. That's thechrisberryshow.com. You can also call Chris Berry at 810-355-2584. That's 810-355-2584. This program content reflects the opinions of Chris Berry and his guests, not the elder care firm, Prosperity Capital Advisors, or the C.J. Berry Group, and is subject to change at any time without notice. Content provided herein is for informational purposes only and should not be used or construed as investment or legal advice, or a recommendation regarding the purchase or sale of any security, or to follow any legal or tax strategy. There's no guarantee that the strategist's statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Indices are not available for direct investment. Any investor who attempts to mimic the performance of an index would incur fees and expenses which would reduce returns. All investing involves risk, including the potential for loss of principal. There's no guarantee that any investment plan or strategy will be successful. We recommend that you consult with a professional dedicated to your needs. This program is furnished by the Elder Care Firm.